Good day. I'm Doug Bloss, President and CEO of Armstrong International. I'd like to welcome our viewers to this live stream series on decarbonization of thermal energy. I'm real pleased to have join me today Blaine, Executive Director of the Renewable Thermal Collaborative, the RTC. Welcome, Blaine, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Doug.
Can you tell our viewers a little bit about the RTC, its mission, its membership, and its progress in this short period of time?
Sure. Yeah, the RTC is a multi-stakeholder collaborative, primarily centered around large industrial, institutional, and commercial users of thermal energy. And our goal is to help those companies decarbonize thermal energy. Right. The RTC is a climate change decarbonization initiative, and our members, which span multinational industrials, U.S. localities, healthcare providers, university system, they're all working to decarbonize their operations, their footprints. And the thermal piece is you're in the thermal business. The thermal piece is a critical and massive decarbonization opportunity.
Indeed, it is, Blaine. And I'm pleased to say that collaboration and collaborating aligns very well with Armstrong's culture. We have a slogan: "Knowledge not shared is energy wasted," and we live by it. On our website, we've assembled the largest thermal library of online videos, course content, to help users understand how thermal energy is used, how to operate safely and reliably. It's located in Armstrong University. What I've noted about membership of the RTC is, while we all share the same planet, there are some of your members that compete in the same marketplace.
Sure.
Has that inhibited this collaboration? Are people guarded, or are you finding a pretty free exchange?
No, I tell you, it's really a testament to the spirit of collaboration that they all bring to bear, right? There's been we're all careful about confidential business information, of course, but everyone comes to the meetings, comes to this conversation looking to share lessons learned, looking to collaborate with their peers, looking to accelerate the pace of progress here. And everyone is remarkably generous with what they know. Knowledge needs to be shared.
Yeah, it does, and it's a wonderful spirit. And I think at a time that the challenge is so great. I note also that many of the clients in the membership, and also many that we're dealing with, Fortune 500 users that are multinationals with operations across the globe. They seem to covet a single solution that they can scale around the world. Would you tell our viewers if you found a single silver bullet here to make this happen?
That's a really important question, right? And the short version is no. There isn't a single solution, and it's been pretty interesting to watch the RTC members confront that challenge, right? I mean, a lot of the staff, member staff that participates with the collaborative has an engineering background, right? These are technically savvy people, and they're experienced energy managers, utility folks, and sustainability people. They get the technology complexity, right? And they fully understand that the thermal decarbonization. I mean, I have a sort of a joke about this, right? The thermal decarbonization conversation is a yes and conversation, right? We're gonna continue to do all the efficiency work we can identify, right, and continue to work that aspect of it. We're gonna look at electrification where it makes sense, because there are places where electrification makes great sense. We're going to look at renewable natural gas. We're going to look at thermal storage. We're going to look at biomass, sustainable biomass where it makes sense. We're going to look at green hydrogen. And it's no one seems to have the expectation that there's simply going to be one technology that comes, scales instantly, and solves the problem across the board, right? As you noted, this is an important consideration to keep in mind, right? These companies are trying to deploy and scale decarbonization solutions across very complex, near global, and something flat out global operational portfolios, right? There's regulatory complexity there, operational complexity, there's simply physical distribution complexity, and so the solution set in Denmark may be a little different than the solution set in Nebraska, which will be different than the solution set in Asia Pacific, and so companies are working really hard to understand which opportunities and solutions slot in where in their operational portfolios. And that's a complex exercise.
It is, Blaine, and it's very aligned with our own experiences, and the message we're delivering to our clients is that while there might not be a repeatable solution, you can deploy a repeatable process. For starting with, thermal mapping and assessing a facility to study sources and sinks of thermal energy, and see where opportunities there may be to begin by optimizing. So your experiences and the message that's kind of resonating with clients is very much a tailor-made approach, but can use a repeatable process. This journey has for customers many stakeholders. Consumers are demanding that we're all more environmentally responsible. Shareholders want to see the same thing. Brand reputations are at stake. Yep. And increasingly, the investment community is seeking more accountability on environmental goals and results. When you look at that challenge, there's clearly risks and rewards in the journey. How would you kind of summarize those risks and rewards?
This has been an interesting piece of the equation that's been evolving over the. I've been in this space for 20 years. Engage with companies around climate goal setting, and then implementation behind that goal setting. And yeah, I've had a whole series of calls over the last 6 to 10 months where a corporate global energy manager will call me and say, "So, the C-suite has just handed me a science-based target, a net zero goal, a big ambitious goal, and they've told me to go solve the problem, right? And so I'm calling you to because I found the RTC, and I'm hopeful that you have the answers." Which is an interesting jumping off point. But what's noticeable there is that the global energy lead, the chief sustainability officer now is getting this direction, this ambitious direction from their C-suite, right? That's really exciting. As you note, it does bring some risk, right? There are complexities to manage here, right? This is not a simple task, and there is diligence to be done. Business partners, process, greenhouse gas accounting. Everybody wants to avoid greenwashing. Companies need to understand the technologies that they're going to slot in here, right? And what exactly is green hydrogen, and how do I communicate this to my stakeholders? How do I share that we're actually having a positive impact on the world, right? How do I make sure I'm doing this in a way that will have credibility, that follows the best practices in the market, that in fact reduces emissions, and that I can convey to my stakeholders, and that helps me manage my enterprise risk, right? Companies need to do this within the constraints of their core business objectives, and if they're publicly traded, they are responsible to shareholders and to institutional investors. Now, actually, that's another interesting piece of this, right? Shareholders and institutional investors are more and more interested in climate. We've seen a really interesting change the last couple of years on the way on the support that shareholder resolutions around climate are getting in votes, right? It's stakeholders are paying attention, and so circling back to your question, we see companies coming into this space committed to doing the right thing, right, to addressing their emissions, and wanting to make sure that they're doing it in a way that is genuine, positive, real, and can be communicated to stakeholders in a way that those stakeholders will understand and say, actually, nice job, right? You said you were going to do something, and you're doing it, and nice job.
Yeah, it's clear there are rewards for brands and companies that get it right. And getting it wrong certainly has some consequences. And what we've found is having a collaborative like RTC brings like-minded professional people that know that business. And those are the types of people that you need to engage for a challenge that's this dynamic, with this much reward and this much risk. And so we're just very happy to be a part of it. Blaine, when we talk technology very candidly, and frankly, we've been perhaps a beneficiary as a company that's a century plus old, pretty slow moving technology wise. That seems like it's about to change. You've got some technology participants in the RTC. There are other approaches and solutions that are emerging. What are you seeing on the technology front that might make this challenge a little bit easier?
Yeah, that's a terrific set of questions, and I mean, I guess I have a multi-part answer, which will come as no surprise to anyone who's talked to me before. Technology innovation, right? So thermal storage is a new, very interesting and accelerating frontier. We have some companies doing really interesting work on thermal storage. Hydrogen, of course, right? Green hydrogen is one of the things that everyone's got their eye on, right? It seems to offer industrial scale cost reductions, massive emission savings. Looks like a pretty interesting way of helping to manage the intermittency of renewable electricity generation. Pairs interestingly with offshore wind. So that's an area where we're going to see a lot of sort of technology focused R&D, improved deployment, and re-improvement cycles, right? As we iterate and scale there. Solar thermal, right? There's some really interesting solar thermal technology. My grandparents had a solar thermal array back in the mid '70s to heat their pool. This is not my grandparents' solar thermal. This is high temperature, modular, deployable, scalable solar thermal with really impressive capacities, ranging from low right through medium and up to high temperature heat. But part of what's interesting to note about this is that there's a set of issues and barriers here that is absolutely centered on technology, right? We have some technology questions to address. We also have some policy questions to address and some market questions to address, and they're all interrelated. And you start to work on some of the technology questions, and you're quickly having a policy discussion, right? Because think about scaled infrastructure level R&D and deployment of some of these technologies. Well, there are policy levers that we can use, right? The PTC and the ITC and the RPSs in the States were bedrock to the renewable electricity transition here in the US and globally. But those are all US instruments. We have got to have similar kinds of policy for clean heat, right? And markets, right? We need greenhouse gas accounting guidance. We need instruments that serve the deployment of technologies and work with the policy. And suddenly we're going round and round, and now we're hitting scale. So the technology question is a great place to start, and it takes us to a couple other places that are a really important part of this transformational dynamic that we're all working toward.
Yeah, it's really an exciting time. I tell our people that we've never been so relevant. And despite being in thermal energy exclusively for over a century, we have to approach this with some humility. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
That's right.
We have to be technology agnostic to pick the right solution at the right time, at the right place for a client. And in fact, leading a company that makes most of its money in steam accessories, we find ourselves taking clients off of steam to hot water because it's the right thing to do. And you know,
Yep.
what's going to sustain us for the next generation is helping our clients with this very significant challenge. But it's exciting. We need to all be approachable to new technologies that emerge and help our clients get there with this challenge. You know, let's talk about that from a business standpoint, Blaine. We've read a number of studies on the cost to take carbon out of thermal energy.
Yeah.
And every study ends up describing the investment with a T. It's going to be trillions of dollars. We've never seen in our lifetimes this kind of investment coming into reconfiguring thermal energy. But we ask ourselves, you know, how is this going to get funded? You mentioned renewable electricity. You've had some experience in that world. Are corporations going to commit their precious capital to a non-core activity like thermal energy, or do you see other alternatives emerging?
Yeah, this is a critical question, right? I mean, how do we pay for this? How do we pay for the transition? And you know, we were chatting before, right? And part of we can start with the companies, but this quickly rolls up to being you know, national infrastructure level kinds of questions, right? That's the scale of the transition that we're describing here, and I think that we're going to see companies make investments. We're seeing that now, but to your point, and it's a critical point. We're going to need to attract other sources of capital. Part of what's exciting here, you know, we often look at the renewable electricity market in the U.S. For lessons learned and tools and experiences we can pull forward. One of the most important pieces of that whole transition, the renewable electricity transition, was the ability to attract third-party capital, right, to make renewable energy an investment grade issue. And I think that there's a lot of potential to do that here. And I think that the scale, the pace and scale of change that we have to drive collectively across all these companies' operations, across our thermal energy systems and infrastructure, we're going to have external sources of capital, right? And I think that there are very important business model questions here, and business model opportunities for folks that can come in and bring capital at scale to help companies solve their challenges at scale.
We're in those discussions now, Blaine, with Fortune 500 users that clearly are well resourced enough to fund the initiative, but they're attracted to as a service business models, not just for the capital. The capital is important; it's the glue of the whole thing, but also the expertise, especially as technologies evolve, and the operating skills associated with these new technologies to bring the expertise and the risk management skills. So we're aligning ourselves, again, in this spirit of partnership with an ecosystem of partners that can bring capital, risk management skills, and we can complement them with our understanding of thermal energy. And we believe that as a service is going to be a business model that grows in this space. You know, I'd like to ask you, Blaine, to kind of wind this up a little bit. Where do you see the RTC evolving to? Your membership has grown. I've noticed just in the short time you've had it. Congratulations.
Thank you.
As mentioned, you're really in a top of mind topic. But what do you see as the future for the RTC?
Yeah, it's again another spot on question, right? And this past summer, the RTC was very fortunate, and we were selected as the winner of a 2030 Climate Challenge grant, which coming from Lever for Change and the MacArthur Foundation. So we've got now 5 years, $10 million over 5 years to deploy on these issues. And so that support is going to allow us to expand and accelerate our efforts across technologies. We will be doing multi-year, longitudinal, multi-stakeholder collaborations around RNG and green hydrogen and thermal storage, solar thermal, electrification, sustainable biomass, right? The suite of technologies here on the renewable thermal side. We'll be doing focused collaborations around 5 sectors, energy use sectors, right? And the goal here with all of these work streams is to bring in the smart people and companies from across the value equation, right? So end users, financiers, technology experts, innovators, policy people. I'm sure I'm forgetting some folks, but right, to bring in the people that have insight into their piece of the value equation, identify the challenges here, rooted in the perspective of our buyer members, right? How does a large industrial move forward on one of these technologies or as a sector? Identify the challenges and barriers, and then start to address them. And so we're currently in the planning process for 13 new work streams over these 5 years, right? So we're planning to double our membership over the next 12 months, right? Because again, the fundamental, I think the most exciting resource that we bring to bear as the RTC is the collaboration and all of the stakeholders participating in that collaboration, right? These are the folks that are leading their company's efforts to make this change happen, and collectively it's a stunning resource. The experience and the insight and the intelligence available there is remarkable. And then you start to couple that with the same set of skills and experience and perspective from the supply side, right, where Armstrong is participating. And by the way, we continue to be very grateful for Armstrong's support of the RTC. But we can start to facilitate the cross-pollination, the collaboration, the sharing, the information exchange, and the innovation that's again going to sort of take us back to scaled transformation. So I'm expecting incredibly exciting things from the RTC over the course of this 5-year grant. And I should note that a brand new work stream for us as part of this award is diversity, equity, inclusion, and environmental justice, right? So as we think about the thermal decarbonization transformation, we are starting to think about how to make that a positive transformation for everyone, how to ensure the workforce of the future, how to ensure that all communities can participate in this. So that's a pretty interesting and exciting new frontier for us also.
It sure is, Blaine. And congratulations on winning the grant. Congratulations on a very successful second summit. We were happy participants in that. And the viewers that we've spoken to really got a lot out of that. I would also invite our viewers who'd like to learn more about Armstrong International and our methodology for helping clients decarbonize, which is optimize, minimize, decarbonize, to visit our website at armstronginternational.com. Thank you so much, Blaine, for joining us for this live stream. We sure look forward to working with you and your colleagues at the RTC for many years to come. All the best.
Thank you, Doug. Pleasure to be here. Appreciate it.